Hi everyone, this is Father Warner D'Souza. Today we are going to look at the text of Matthew chapter 15 verses 21 to 28. Hammering this gospel passage home is not going to be very easy. You got to suss this one out. Jesus seems to have lost his empathy, and perhaps this is the only narrative where at first he denies help to someone in need. So was Jesus just having a bad hair day after his run-in with the Pharisees in verses 1 to 9 of chapter 15? You got to let the muddied waters of hatred between the Jews and the Gentiles settle on this one a bit to see why Jesus initially said what he did. Matthew's Gospel, and if you look at the title, also says the Canaanite woman. And this already indicates a deep-seated historical animosity which Mark in his Gospel does not use. He calls her the Syrophoenician woman, and that we read in Mark chapter 7 verses 24 to 30, a far more acceptable term of address. Jesus, for some unexplained reason, withdraws from Galilee and walks into the sea-coast region northwest of Palestine, into Tyre and Sidon. The people of this land, which Israel conquered under Joshua, were considered pagans by the Jews. Many of the Canaanites had been pushed northward into Phoenicia when the Hebrews invaded the territory. The hatred was mutual and quite understandable. When Matthew wrote the Gospel, he was writing to a Jewish audience who had a deep respect for the law and for the tradition. They would be intrigued, if not offended, by the actions of Jesus, who willingly strayed and led his disciples into pagan land. While Matthew's Gospel is not entirely hostile to the Gentiles, it most certainly keeps the door ajar for them to come on board. Jesus thus ignores the woman's cry for mercy, a cry not for herself, but for her daughter who is tormented by a devil. It is plausible to assume that the fame of Jesus, which had spread far and wide, reached the districts of this Phoenician neighborhood. The woman, although a foreigner, identifies him physically, but she also hails him in messianic terms. She calls him the Son of David. This alone should have won her the favor she sought for it takes the disciples another 2 chapters of this Gospel for them to recognize Jesus as the Son of God and bow down and worship him at the Transfiguration. Like the Magi, she adopts the posture befitting a king. She kneels before him, begging for help. Yet, much to the surprise of a modern-day reader, Jesus at first ignores her and addresses his disciples. He seems to give them and not her his rationale for not helping. He was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Here is where Jesus meets his Waterloo. Never underestimate the power of a desperate mother, and if it means that she has to kneel before him, then kneel she does. It's a bit mind-boggling to think that this compassionate Savior has turned her down twice already, and the second time he does it with what seems like an unexplainable slur. It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs, he says. Not only is this harsh to hear, but even more repugnant when you realize that this was a contemptuous way of referring to the Gentiles. They were called kuon, meaning wild cur or an unclean dog. Jesus, however, uses the word kunarion, meaning small dog or pet dog. He does not insult her as the Jews did with the Gentiles by calling them dogs. He was merely explaining a point using an example of a pet dog. Perhaps it is a mother's instinct that kicks in, one who will never be deterred by apparent negativity or insult. She is willing, even if it has to be like a pet dog, to joyfully accept the scraps. Heads must have turned listening to that comment, and perhaps in Matthew's community, hearts must have changed. It certainly made a deep impression on Jesus, for repeatedly until now, he has had to chastise his disciples and even Peter for their little faith. It was a Gentile, an outsider, a foreigner, one considered unclean and slurred upon, who wins the heart of Jesus with, as Jesus says, her great truth. Surely but steadily, Matthew's late first century readers were getting the point. The claim to be merely Abraham's children would get them nowhere if they did not mirror the great faith of their historic enemies. The day belonged to the underdog. God bless you for being part of these reflections that we share with you. Now it's time to pass it on. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you like, you can also go to my blog where I have all these teachings in text form, along with some very interesting articles from the world of food with plenty of recipes. I have a section on art and heritage, there's a section on travel, and there's also a section on opinions on the faith. Have a blessed day, everybody.